welcome back to our Building an Enterprise Level System with Xero series and our webinar today about speeding up bill processing and making bulk payments. I'm seeing a veritable deluge of people come through, so I'm just going to give it a few more seconds before we get started. Just a couple of housekeeping points. Please do fire through any and all questions you've got in the Q&A box, and either our panelists will jump on those as relevant and answer them in the chat, or we'll pick them up at the end. We've got 30 minutes of content today. We'll do the intros, we'll do the discussion. I'll briefly preview what's coming up. That will take us to the full half hour, and then we've got Q&A as bonus on top of that. So excited for the discussion this morning. Got a phenomenal panel for you for this session as we go to webinar number 11 in this series. So just to refresh, my name is David Tuck. I am the co-founder and CEO here at Mayday. Our mission is to mend month end, starting with the needs of multi-entity businesses, intercompany recharges, cross-entity bank reconciliation, keeping intercompany loans in balance. I started my career as an accountant with Deloitte, trained there, and then headed up a succession of startup and SME finance teams. I've twice headed up finance teams of multi-entity Xero using businesses. And with this series, we're really trying to create the resource that I wish I'd had as a finance leader about how best to scale with Xero for those businesses. I've been an accounting tech entrepreneur for the last decade. I was previously the founder at Chaser, and for the last couple of years, I've been building Mayday with my co-founder Griff and our amazing team. And in terms of this series, so at Mayday, we're for larger Xero users. The majority of our customers have in-house finance teams, and we found they kept on coming back to two questions. Is Xero still the right system for me? And if the answer to that is yes, how long is that the case for? Indefinitely, or what will be the point at which I outgrow Xero? The nature of uncertainty is that when we don't know something, that inevitably leads us to act earlier. The ERP move is horrible and hectic, as one of our customers described it. It's incredibly expensive, and that's all before 58% of ERP implementations fail. We've got this idea of ER peace of mind, as we've taken to calling it, the peace of mind of knowing that I can grow with Xero into my growth phase as a business without needing to make that move. This series is very much framed against the backdrop of how can we be useful to our target customer. It's not product marketing. It's not how to build a best-in-class app stack. There's a reason I'm not wearing a Mayday t-shirt for any of these webinars. It's about writing the mixed conception that it's not possible to scale with Xero into one's growth phase as a business. But equally, it's not about overcorrecting and replacing one myth with another. That Xero is this all-singing, all-dancing panacea that can scale with any business for the remainder of time. There are situations where a business will need to move on from Xero, so we also want to touch on that as well. That is enough from me. I'm so thrilled to be joined by our fantastic panel today of Josh, Emily, and Joe. So I'm going to hand over to them for their intros. Josh, over to you first.
Hey, thanks. Pleasure to be here. I'm the CFO of Yardlink, which is a high growth between Series A and B business. We are a procurement marketplace for construction businesses, pretty high volume in terms of AP, fairly operational business by nature. And I'm a chartered accountant. I trained at PwC at the beginning of my career and left pretty soon after qualifying to sort of go into industry and work with some larger organizations in commercial roles before moving into the world of sort of private high growth businesses where I'm sort of leading my second team now and enjoying every minute of it.
Amazing. Josh, brilliant to have you here. Emily, over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me, David. So my name is Emily. I work for Mole Growth Accountants. My role is actually split into three, so I mainly deal with business development, onboarding new clients, and keeping abreast of the apps and tech. A little bit about Mole Growth Accountants is we do look after small and medium businesses, so they're very, smaller clients, but going all the way up to big group companies too. I'm also part of the Early Adopters Hub.
Amazing. So Emily, thrilled to have you join us. Joe, over to you to complete the intros.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Nook. Nook is a payments and accounts payable product integrated with Xero. My background, so studied computer science, but I've spent the vast majority of my career either as a small business owner or in early stage startups. And excited for today's conversation.
Fantastic. Well, look, just to kick off the discussion, Joe, I'm gonna boomerang straight back to you to anchor us. Like, what do we mean by speed up bill processing and make bulk payments?
Sure. So I think bill processing in general is a very manual process. So you have to process a bunch of invoices, you have to go and get a bunch of approvals, and then you have to execute payments. And typically for most businesses as they scale, if you've got one bill, this isn't so painful. Once you get 10, it gets a little bit more painful. Once you get 1,000, it's incredibly painful. And that process is very much logging into Xero, looking at your age payables, and then having to log into the bank. Most banks don't support bulk payments. So you've got business owners, CFOs, CEOs spending evenings and weekends having to copy and paste amounts into their bank just to make payments. So I think the topic today is about how you speed up that process in a secure way, and how you can actually use tools out there to make bulk payments.
Love it. So it's about efficiency and speeding up the process whilst maximizing security.
That's correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So that's amazing framing. Josh, Emily, I'm really keen to kind of come to you first in terms of, before we get on to the growing pains and what one can do with Xero plus the ecosystem when it comes to accounts payable. What does Xero, in terms of its native functionality, what does it do well?
I don't mind going first. So Xero is obviously a really great accounting tool, and there's so many different pros to using Xero. It's ease of usability. A lot of people in the industry know how to use Xero, and the app ecosystem. So there are things obviously that Xero doesn't do too well, but having all of these apps that connect into Xero, where they focus on specific topics, they do those things really great too, whether it's stock, AP, the banking. So yeah.
Amazing. And then Josh, anything from a sort of an AP side for you that you think, oh, that's really great in Xero?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that point around it being sort of a clean and quite easy to use system that Emily's making is actually particularly relevant to AP in my view, right? Because quite often you have a team of fairly junior people or quite new to finance in the team working within that space. And actually, if there's one hurdle that you can remove to help get these people trained up and working on a system, then that really helps. So it is good that Xero is very easy to train people with and they find it easy to use. The second point really is around the reporting as well. Xero is pretty flexible and good on reporting. I think it's one of the reasons, why it's such a popular tool. And it's no difference when it comes to the AP side of things as well. It's pretty easy to go very high level, like Joe mentioned, your age payables, to other sort of reports within Xero that are pre-set up, and that you can actually drill into that detail quite quickly to find things or find out what you need, actions you need to take. And I suppose there are a couple of nice little things, like you can add a planned payment date across all your bills, which is a bit of a time investment, but certainly helps with cash flow forecasting or building a payment run. So there are some things out the box that it does have that are nice, but yeah, as you scale, obviously it starts to have a few shortcomings, I suppose.
Well, look, lead us away, Josh. Making my job easy in terms of what are the growing pains. We're already touching on that, so please do take us away when it comes to bill processing and making bulk payments.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, if you were just using manual Xero in isolation, it would be pretty manual, sort of punching everything into Xero from the start. I don't think there's many businesses that haven't connected some sort of OCR or tool to help get the info into Xero from the start. And it does get exponentially harder. I like, Joe, what you said around, a few it's okay, 100 it's hard, up into the thousands it gets really, really difficult. It becomes a big problem. And obviously part of the problem with scaling is if it's very manual, obviously you'd be sort of having a big team sitting in AP, and that's the last thing that your CEO or board want to look at your finance team and see. They definitely want to see sort of investment into the business going into other areas. So I think managing that while scaling is very difficult. Obviously, as team size grows, the delegation of authority around payments becomes a little bit hard too. You don't want to have to give bank access to everybody. So that's another difficult point. And then also just as you add scale, the process behind things becomes a lot more important. Being able to execute around specific timelines, everybody working in the same way. So actually, and people, for me, actually, people is a huge part of AP, and great people working in an AP assistant role are kind of gold dust to find when hiring. And to get everybody working in the same way across the same process is just very difficult in this space. My experience tells me. And so that becomes a real challenge when scaling. And so things that you have to help that, such as different systems that sort of make it a bit more uniform, certainly do help a lot.
Right. So yeah, we've got the manual volumes. I love your point there. I'd never thought about it like that, but justifying to your kind of rest of your management team and your board why the finance function needs to spend lots of money on AP is a lot harder than, for example, justifying spend on FP&A, for example, where there's more sort of commercial and business growth benefit. I never thought about it like that.
It is, but it's also, I mean, the point I'd add there is it's actually it's often a lot more critical. It's a lot more foundational. In both the businesses that I've been in, if something goes wrong in AP, things just grind to a halt immediately. Suppliers stop sending stuff out, stop transacting, customers see the impact. So it has like a real world operational impact if your AP is not working well. If they've sort of dropped invoices or things are too aged, it can really bleed into your business performance. So it's one thing having a forecast for 18 months away wrong or iffy, but where it starts impacting the day-to-day, it's actually kind of a lot more important. So it should actually stack up as an easier business case, but for some reason it's always a tough one.
But yeah, the real world operational impact of AP. Fascinating. Emily, anything from your perspective to add in terms of what those AP growing pains are with Xero?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on, Josh is exactly right in that we have seen businesses where they've really struggled with cash flow, and where they aren't able to pay freelancers and subcontractors. That does have a massive impact onto the day-to-day operations. So having that AP person in place is actually really, really key to them knowing exactly what money needs to leave the business and when. But also, like Josh mentioned, in terms of the cash flow, that's really key also for the business to know. It'll probably be good to touch on where actually the last 10 months where I've actually worked on a project that was an ERP system, and they came to us actually in a bit of a mess. So the FD left them in a mess. Unfortunately, there was fraud committed too. And so their cash flow was all over the place. They didn't have any processes. They trusted him implicitly, essentially. And we actually sat down with all of the finance team members to work out what the processes were. And we gave them 3 options. So one is we could migrate them to Xero and have all the bells and whistles attached to it. 2, they could stay on the system, but obviously that would be something new for us to learn. And the third one was essentially hire another finance controller. They actually decided to stay on the ERP system that they were using. Quite interesting because they were trying to sell the company, and the company they were selling to used that same system. So that's the reason why they stayed on it. But in terms of growing, and they were a group of companies as well, they could very easily go on to Xero, and actually it would have made everything a lot smoother in terms of the process of the AP in particular as well, in terms of the whole cash flow and making sure that they have enough money for the money to leave the business when it did. there was actually a hell of a lot of duplicates as well, which is a lot harder to spot on an ERP system as opposed to using and utilizing Xero. The great thing about Xero reports for the AP is actually it's so easy to spot the duplicates. And having that payment date in place as well also does help with that cash flow problem. But yeah, everything was obviously a lot more clunkier. We obviously had to learn a new system. The team that were using this ERP system didn't really know how it worked too. So there were a lot of limitations when it did come to using that ERP system in terms of not being able to have apps that do connect to make it more streamlined. It was a really manual process because you don't also have like where you can't set up supplier rules as such. Things were getting posted everywhere. It wasn't really like a consistent approach. So when it comes to the final piece or part of the puzzle where you want to look at your profit and loss and seeing where you perhaps spent over budget and things like that is really hard to tell.
Fascinating. And then, I mean, I think that brings us really nicely to the point that I touched on at the beginning about, you know, there will be some times where a business does need to move to an ERP. In an accounts payable bill processing context, you know, are there any of the pain points that we've discussed or any others that we haven't mentioned that are immediate red flags that a business has outgrown Xero?
So I have one from experience here, which is at our prior business, we did move away from Xero to NetSuite and change our sort of AP connected tools in the process as well. And the main reason we did that was actually we didn't have enough fields in Xero to, I guess, get our data right. So obviously there's a description field, there's a reference, and the supplier, bill reference is usually there. But actually we wanted to track because the our COGS was coming through AP, like our COGS is billed to us. We wanted to be able to track that in ways, not just by like GL, but actually by order number. You know, an order comes through, we know we've got that order number revenue tagged up on the revenue side. We've also got it tagged up on the AP side, but we're having to manually enter that. So we actually went, Xero doesn't really have a place to put that though, like a separate field. We were sort of adding it onto the description or the reference. So, without that, there was some serious shortcomings in how we could sort of show order level profitability out of our Xero data, or tag things up in a way that we could really investigate things. And that's actually probably the main reason why we ended up moving to NetSuite in some ways. I think there would have been a workaround for everything else that we were coming up against, but that we didn't. So once we moved off of that, it really helped out from a data perspective, and we could get much clearer sort of commercial information out of our ERP.
Fascinating. So the complexity for you was about, added fields to be able to segment your data where you needed more than the capacity that Xero provided. Exactly.
Yeah. I think when it depends how sort of AP heavy your business is and what information comes into you via AP. I think if it's just some overheads and it's all relatively simple and there's a few GLs that it goes to, then this just wouldn't come up. But it was just a particularly sensitive part of our financial makeup.
Brilliant. And then I'm really keen to move on now to what is possible when it comes to accounts payable with Xero plus its ecosystem. And Josh, if I could come back to you first with, particularly from a Yardlink standpoint, what you've been able to build from an AP process perspective.
So from an AP process perspective, I guess we've worked with a couple of things. We're actually working with Nook as quite a long client now. I think that we've been since some of the early days. So actually with that, I suppose the product's been building out as well as we have. So now it's not just sort of I guess like reading of the invoices. There's also the actual executing payments out of Nook, sort of split authority. Initially, it was just, we did have, there was a day when it was the founder keying in payments into our bank. But since then, things have come a long way, and we've got a team that are able to put the invoices onto Xero, someone else be approving them at different authority levels. So that problem is definitely solved. And then also it's helped tackle some of the skill set issues where we have a team that, are not fully trained in making a payment and reconciling that back to the transactions on Xero, and putting together a payment run. These are all things that happen in spreadsheets, quite manually prone to error, time consuming. So we've got around a lot of that stuff as well. They kind of do it all within the system, which definitely helps avoid errors.
Amazing. So if we break it down, so how do your bills get into Xero in the first instance?
So that's via OCR, which I'd recommend an OCR tool for anyone with any volume around AP. Really, it's a big win from a time perspective. And also, usually you can set up rules around the coding, which definitely help avoid errors and just make sure that it's consistent how things get into the system, which I think Emily also touched on.
Amazing. And then one of the team will sort of approve those as draft, and you'll have sort of different approval levels for different bills.
Yeah, exactly. There's the approval point is actually a bit of can be time consuming. There's other tools that I think that can help with that, or funnel queries, but we have quite a high query rate on our supplier invoices where it might not match the information we're expecting to see on the invoice as per our system. So that's actually something that has to come offline at times, unfortunately, and goes into other systems where we manage that with our operations team. But then come back into the system where they can move that from, say, inquiry or awaiting payment into approved, and then it can be scheduled on a payment run.
Amazing. Emily, over to you in terms of what you've seen with your clients them do when it comes to accounts payable with Xero.
So I suppose all of our clients are different, because we do have a range of client levels and things like that. So where we are, and the beauty of it is of having us there too, is that we can be their finance team if there ever was a need, by using all of these systems and knowing exactly how they work. So we're similar to Josh, where obviously we use a separate software to make sure that we have the supplier rules set up, which feeds directly into Xero. That obviously brings in the invoice too, which is perfect. So obviously you can see it there on the system live if you ever wanted to do a spot check and check the VAT in particular. The other side to that, when we are then wanting to create the payment side of things, whether they do it once every 2 weeks or once every month, they can use where you're selecting all the bills that you're wanting that need to be paid, and then push them through to a different software, which then eliminates the risk of needing a team member to be part, albeit on the bank, to set up the payments. But also, because of the payments there, you've got all your sort codes and account numbers. It feeds into this software, which then does double check all of the information's correct, and it obviously does go to the right bank account that they are looking to pay. And essentially that then just goes out the door. But with that too, the software that we use for that, all they have to do is literally just top it up. So they know really how much they need to kind of fund this on whether it's once every 2 weeks or monthly basis. But in addition to that, in terms of the AP where you need POs, again, it's a separate software that we have outside of Xero, where the team don't need access to Xero. They can just do it outside the system. There's a workflow max where you can set up different variations where somebody may need to approve it if it is over a certain level. So there are different things that you can do outside of Xero.
Amazing. And then Joe, sorry, Josh, you jump in.
Sorry, I was one of those points made me think of something else actually, which is something to look out for around the payments piece is actually we in our previous system, you know, even if you get ERP which ties up a really nice payment run, quite often that file comes out of the system before uploading it onto your bank. So it's just another point of failure where, you know, bank details could be changed in between fraudulently or accidentally before going onto the bank. And so the more you can bring a system together and it's like a closed loop, the much more, I guess, much more secure it's always going to be and have much less room for error. So I just wanted to add that point in.
Yeah, fascinating. The sort of, in that case, the superior robustness that you are able to get with Xero plus ecosystem compared to an ERP.
Yeah, for sure. With the right tool, I guess, paired with it, you can, I guess, do more outside of Xero and actually keep it all in one place, which is really nice.
And Joe, over to you in terms of what you've seen across your spectrum of customers, you know, what they've been able to do with Xero, you know, plus the ecosystem when it comes to their AP processes. What are some of the stories?
Yeah, we've got a lot of stories. I think our customers use us in various ways, from the likes of Yardlink that are doing high volume, complex AP, to smaller businesses that might be using us for purely bulk payments, where they do, you know, HubDoc processing. They run the sort of single approval workflow within Xero, and then they'll use Nook to execute those bulk payments. And, you know, as I said, 10 is probably manageable in your bank. Once you're at 100 supplier bills, invoices, you want to be looking for a tool from the ecosystem. So yeah, we see those sort of two categories of business use us. Businesses who want that sort of end-to-end robust AP workflows with purchase orders, multi-step approval, and you know, payment execution. And then there's other businesses where they have got other apps they're using from the ecosystem that are robust or directly from Xero, and they want to use, you know, other tools out there to do the payments piece. You know, the vast majority of customers we speak to and prospects are really frustrated by the bank experience, not just because they don't support bulk payments, but because they've got to then go in and do that reconciliation back to the invoice, credit note, etc. within the tool. So that's what we see.
Amazing. Well, look, that's been an incredibly rich discussion. There's some great questions coming through on the Q&A, a few that are Nook specific, so I might give Joe a little bit of homework whilst I'm speaking over the next couple of minutes to field those, if that's okay, and then we'll pick up the general Q&A in a couple of minutes. But look, just before I kind of showcase what's coming up next, I'd love to get everyone's top tip for scaling with Xero. So Josh, I'll come to you first.
Mine would be do a few transactions yourself, get into the nuts and bolts, really understand what the pain points actually are, understand what the biggest problem is, and find the right tool to fix that.
Amazing. Emily, over to you.
I would say make sure obviously you have all of your processes documented first, but speak to an advisor that can actually truly help you. Speak to them about how your business operates, and then you'll be able to see where these things can be streamlined if they can be.
Amazing. And then Joe, don't worry, I'm doing the preview what's coming up in a second, so you'll have the ability to go back to the chat. Your top tip for scaling with Xero.
I think two things I'd say. So it's really easy to suffer from app overload. So actually sit down and map out the process before you start sort of plugging and playing all these different apps in and work out what you need. And then secondly, specific to AP and scaling with Xero, don't try to do too much. So change management piece, you know, start small, maybe just look at the payments piece and then begin to expand out from there, because it's very easy to boil the ocean and end up quite frustrated.
Fantastic. Well, look, let me just preview what we've got coming up over the next couple of days, and then we will get into the Q&A. So tomorrow, we've got Scale Your Approvals as a bigger team with Gabriel Kiesenblatt from The Lost Explorer, Hilary Dyson from British Financials, and Alex Keselman from Approval Max. We've then got Unlock Features for Scaling Businesses in Xero itself with Steve Jarvis from Manufacture 2030, Heidi Seal from Business Sense, and Alistair Gardner from Xero. And then on Friday, we conclude the series with automating multi-entity month end, with Harriet Hope from Arbalest, Lauren Harvey from Full Stop, and Griff and I from Mayday. So that's what we coming up over the next 3 days. We've got some great questions that have come through. So let me just pick up. So Nathan's got a great kind of question here about security that I should be thinking about when it comes to accounts payable, and specifically giving a product payment control. What should I be thinking about here? Joe, I'll come to you first, and then Josh, Emily, please do add in anything from your perspective.
Sure. So I think using tools such as Nook, but there are of course others out there that give you bank-like functionality, you need to be looking for a few things. Firstly, the security on the app itself. So do they have two-factor authentication on just like a bank, but do they also have two-factor challenges on point of fund movement, either into the application or out of the application? That's the first thing I'll be looking for. The second thing I'll be looking for is form of confirmation of payee. You'll all be familiar with this. It's when you log onto your bank, you make a payment and it says this account name doesn't match. I'll be looking for that type of functionality inside a solution. It's going to help you mitigate fraud. That's where I'd start.
Fantastic. Josh, Emily, anything else from your side?
There are other apps also that don't have to connect into your bank account. So essentially, once you've got that app set up, it sends the money out. All you have to do is basically just top it up. So there is that solution too, but just make sure that they are FCA regulated too.
I think it's pretty well covered from my regard. I mean, and then provided the actual system has the right things in place, just making sure that your team understand actually keeping their credentials safe as well, and how to use it and not sharing them and that sort of thing can be just an important one to keep on top of.
Great. And the next question was around, Josh, I'll come to you first on this. Like, how frequently do you make your pay runs?
Dave's already laughing. So we've got, I mean, we have two main pay runs. There's a big one at the end of the month, one sort of right in the middle of the month for certain suppliers, but then we actually have certain suppliers that we have to pay before an order will go out, so we don't have terms with them. And there's a few specific to the industry type companies that work like that only. So we do a lot of pro forma payments. So they're going every day. It's very, very active. So that's a fairly loose answer, sorry. I would recommend building, for most businesses, trying to build around like bi-weekly payment, to be honest.
So you have a sort of monthly set piece, a mid-month set piece, but then effectively daily due to the ad hoc nature of needing to make pro forma payments.
Yeah.
And how do you, on the pro forma side, because I remember this was always a thing with me at Fevertree, like how do you best coordinate that as a team?
It's taken a few iterations to get right. Obviously, it has to happen really quickly. To be fair, a lot of it goes through Slack as a flag. There's one available. There's a specified email address for some of our pro forma invoices as well, to make sure that inbox is sort of very closely monitored. And actually, one of the tripping up points here can be speed of payment when it is actually on the bank. So making sure that you have a system in place that actually does work as quickly as a faster payment if it isn't one that's coming directly from a bank.
Fascinating. Well, look, hugely grateful to our incredible panel today, Josh, Emily, and Joe, for taking the time to share your insights. I've learned a huge amount from this discussion. Thank you to our audience and your rich source of questions and engagement. And yeah, I hope you've had a great kind of session. I look forward to seeing you for the remaining 3 webinars in the series. And to catch up on anything you've missed so far, you can find that at enterprise.getmayday.com, as well as the ability to register for upcoming webinars. thank you everyone for your time, and have a great rest of the day.